Overall, I have just 10 slides and will not take more than 15 minutes. So, next, I'll wait another 15 minutes. So, colleagues, we are at a pivotal moment in public transformation. India's government structure, spread over 700 states with vast amount of government-like requirements, is increasingly under increasing strain from urbanization, rising expectation from citizens, as well as capacity bottlenecks. Now, we face a lot of data-related problems. Generation AI basically is not just a technology enabler, it is a catalyst to which can basically help to address all these problems. Look at the scenarios. Leakages in subsidies, failures in grievance reversal, or incorrect routing in public transportation system. These are all data and decision-related problems. When Gen AI is implemented properly, it can basically help us lead from reactive service delivery to predictive governance. But then AI is not magic. AI would be impactful only when it is implemented across departments, scaled up, and ethically governed. So, what is generation AI? Gen AI is nothing but basically creating output for various modalities such as text, images, graphics, code for that particular matter, leveraging autonomous prompts. Now, how different is it from traditional AI? It is different in the sense that the outputs are basically having an approach where human factors, creativity, and efforts are involved. These are based on large foundation models trained on large amounts of data and computation, and they can basically undertake a vast amount of downstream tasks. When we talk about the use cases in the government sector, we see Gen AI uses spanning across multiple domains, be it agriculture, transportation, traffic, urban planning, public welfare. The number of use cases are limited. Today, a citizen in Andhra Pradesh can speak into AI software in Telugu, and that software can basically help him to fill his or her application for speed, or maybe register a complaint. Likewise, a generative AI model can basically help devise an agriculture policy and at the same time define what are the impacts on employment or prices. There are certain low-hanging fruits also. That is automation of documents. Today, generation AI models can basically document RTI responses, concise the reports, prepare draft minutes of meetings, and they save the trouble for government officials and help them to do more important tasks. Now, the users of AI also have their associated risks. One of the most important is AI going to replace humans? No, not for the environment. Because AI complements and influences work that humans do. The second is AI will always give you correct output. That is also not true because the models are as good as the data that are underlying it. The third aspect is the AI models basically come up with new or innovative concepts all the time. That is also not true because the outputs are basically based on the patterns of the data underlying. And last but not least is AI can replace human emotions. Actually not, because AI can replace human actions, but not human intelligence or human emotions. While AI does have a lot of values in terms of, say, efficiency, they can automate our tedious tasks, scalability, they can scale up operations that humans cannot do, quality, reading tons of data, terabytes of data, and then coming up with underlying hidden patterns, or for that matter, bringing creativity aspects by eliminating hidden biases. But then there are certain challenges also. For example, let's say the case of the translation software. If the underlying data or the solution using the model is not robust or not accurate, the translation will not be accurate. The second part is basically with respect to biases. Models have inherent biases, and that could reflect in the output that they generate. They could be aligned to certain thoughts or ideologies. The third aspect is contracts. They can help you to create documents or contracts for procurement models. But then, what are the clauses which are to be included or not included are basically things to be determined and could require human intervention also at times. The fourth example could be with respect to court cases or legal matters. You might have ended up sharing confidential information or sensitive information or past judgments to the AI model, and that could lead to basically data privacy issues. Fifth is, in policies, generation AI models can have biased weightages assigned to different sections of the society or businesses. This could lead to incorrect policies. And last but not the least, with respect to urban planning, the designs made by AI models look definitely good, attractive, and have a wow factor. But then you definitely need human validation from urban planners to validate those designs. So when we talk about all these challenges, it's not that this cannot be addressed. For example, hallucination could be handled by involving a subject matter expert who would validate the output. Data output could be basically streamlined by enforcing models or strong SOPs where we basically record the outputs and maybe build a scorecard also. IP-related aspects could be governed by having an ethical framework, imparting training to your staff. And data privacy related could be handled by ensuring the data related to citizens or for that matter, confidential information is encrypted and anonymized. We can also include design principles like this data privacy by design by building this. So, what are the key considerations? There are several key considerations. Number one is procurement cost. Generation AI models or large language models, they are not cheap. Trust me, they are not cheap. And the important decision is to take whether you want to go for proprietary or open source based solutions. The second aspect is with respect to compute. Whether you are going for a small scale POC or a large scale implementation, the compute will vary significantly. The third aspect is timing. Do you want to be a first mover and then invest heavily into generating AI models, or do you want to wait and be a fast follower and wait till the cost of prices get rationalized, flatten out, and then probably take up the implementation? On the people front, we always say we need to augment capacity. Data science is higher level. But then data science is the word which will basically mean nothing or mean everything. Traditionally, the entire Gen AI model basically has 4 different types of wide specialist resources. For instance, they have the AI models or engineers who will build, develop, and run the models. Then there are prompt engineers who basically collaborate with different functions and ensure that the model outputs are accurate and relevant to the scenario. The third is basically cloud AI teams. They help deploy the solution in the cloud environment. And the last is ML operations. They basically ensure that the models run and improve by enforcing specific controls. On the technology front, we want to ensure that data as well as the model sit close to each other, so there is no latency involved. Second part is data, as I mentioned earlier, they need to be encrypted, privacy data, encrypted, and anonymized. And we also need high quality of data. Fundamentally, at the organization structure, you might like to deploy or assign somebody with the role of a Gen AI officer. Now, this will be a link between the chief data officer and the chief technical officer. And the important aspect with respect to the implementation model, whether you want to have a dispersed model, a centralized model, or a center of excellence. In the dispersed model, the business functions can execute the AI cases without feeding the information to the central model. The central model is where the central team on behalf of the business function implements it. But the better approach is basically the center of excellence model, where the center of excellence team basically defines policies, standards, gives guidelines, impart trainings to the business functions, and the business functions in turn implement the AI. So, having talked about Gen AI, what actually ails the implementation of Gen AI in the government sector? If you look at the Indian context, the AI, Gen AI maturity level in India can be divided into 3 stages. Level 1, where basically government departments automate their traditional flows or implement chatbots. These are very simple, have quick wins, give large amount of output, but then they are not impactful. The second stage is when AI starts to do predictive analysis. Imagine using satellite data to come up with estimating farm output or crop yields. Here AI has a role to play, but then it is very siloed environment. It is not across departments or across the government. The third is basically the highest level of maturity, where Gen AI gets embedded into the system, the policies, the procedures. Now this is where the scenario, like say, you want to distribute AMNEX payments, and you take inputs on real-time the unemployment in that particular region. So what hinders the Gen AI implementation? In my personal view, it's not about technology. Technology has never been a barrier. It is about how well the ecosystem is managed. There are certain key hindrances. The first one is basically working in silos. Traditional government departments, they work in silos, they do not interact. We do not share data. There's no interoperability. The idea is to basically facilitate data exchange. Of course, we can have various controls in process and checks in place, but then interoperability is a matter of concern. The second is procurement process. Traditionally, government procurement processes are still heavily tilted towards standard hardware procurement or, for that matter, regular software implementation projects. When we talk about Gen AI, there is a need to restructure the procurement process. the procurement models have to be more outcome-oriented and SLA-driven, rather than being contractually like with respect to the limitations of liability or standard payment terms. The third is basically industry lessons. Lack of AI knowledge, training, fear of job loss, and inertia level of government officials is basically limiting their participation. So we need to impart training. The fourth is explaining. Any government decision can affect millions of citizens in India. So it is essential that as citizens we ask why, and as government officials they respond why a particular GenAI model has been implemented. So the idea is to build regulations, develop frameworks, then ensure transparency. And the last is scalability. Governments and I would say vendors also, they would like to take simple POC products in GenAI because they're easier to implement, involve less cost and less risk. But the idea is to have larger implementation with greater control by managing the risk. And this can be done by giving more accountability and authority to the government officials and at the same time incentivizing them to take initiatives and go for innovation. And the last slide, how do we go about doing this? The first is to have vision and strategy. Let's not have GenAI models and implementations only at the initial department level. Can it be rolled out at the national level? Can it be taken at the state level? We have something called as mission mode projects. Can that model be adopted right now for GenAI also? The second is basically giving the adequate infrastructure support. We need to define policies, procedures, standards to ensure handshake happens between the government department, which is only the benefit of the citizens. The third is capacity building. We do not need data scientists only at the ministry level. We need data scientists probably at the department level, the function level. They might be contractual staff in government, but then there is a need to have them, external representatives from the industry on board to drive the agenda. And the last is governance scaling. Having standards, procedures, privacy guidelines, giving proper funds, these are all essential for the organization framework. And trust me, by not having this, AI will never scale and will never sustain. That's it from my side. Thank you.